We're going to formally begin now. A very good afternoon and welcome to our 3 days of teaching for the ATCL Teaching Diploma. We have some very, very exciting and detailed things lined up for you. And I hope by the end of the 3 days, which is on Wednesday, you all will be quite confident of taking this diploma. Since we were doing it so detailed, we decided to just handle the ATCL first. And of course, we have today co-hosting this Priya, who's joining me, and our special guest speaker, who I will introduce a little later. As I said earlier, only questions in the Q&A. Everything else can go on chat. It makes it easier for us to follow it and take care of answering your questions. So let's look at what we have for you today. First of all, we'll do a little introduction on the webinar, guidance on the levels of the qualification, who is it for? Also, we will look at the requirements and regulations, as well as the qualification format. What is contained in this qualification? Of course, we can't really do anything without knowing about learning outcomes and assessment criteria. Our guest presenter will join us then, and we will take you through today Unit 1.1 and 1.2. I have put a link to the syllabus in the chat box right on top. Please do go through that. It is the syllabus in details, and then you will understand what is Unit 1.1 and Unit 1.2. The focus of our diplomas, whether it's the ATCL or the LTCL, is to provide evidence of the candidate's ability to apply skills in a teaching context. Now, this is a teaching diploma, and it is the one that is most relevant to all of you. All of you are teachers or aspiring teachers. So this is what we should be looking at to further our education and become proficient teachers. The performance diploma is there also, but that addresses performance. Teaching skills are all in this diploma. So we are going to unravel that for you today. Candidates, that is teachers, should be aware of the learning process of the student, as well as the appropriate teaching strategies. This diploma also covers some essential aspects such as health and safety assessment and reflective practice, how you self-assess your teaching. Let's see where this teaching diploma sits. As you know, we have QCF levels out of the UK, which put all our exams into level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Our grade exams are up to level 3. The ATCL sits at level 4, which you could say is equivalent to the first year of undergraduate or college, as we say here. So that's where the ATCL is. The LTCL, of course, which we are not addressing today, is at level 6. Now, who could this be for? In our syllabus, it says it's for those starting their music teaching career or for students who are working as assistant teachers. But I would say here, it can be for anybody in the music teaching profession, because the way this diploma is constructed and the tests that are administered in it are for any teacher. Yes, you may have your ATCL in the recital, or you've done your diploma a long time ago, but that is all in performance. This diploma is the one that really addresses what you are doing. You are teaching. So please don't think that you need to be a fresher who's just finished grade 8. Also, it could be for rock and pop and electronic keyboard teachers who have done their grade 8. There is no diploma after that in rock and pop, and nor for electronic keyboard. You are all teaching the subject, so this is the ideal diploma to go into. There are some prerequisites, of course, which most of you will fulfill. The age requirement is 18 years. You have to have a Trinity grade 8 or above in the instrument or the voice being taught. And as alternatives, you may have a grade 8 music performance from any other Ofqual accredited board, which is ABRSM, LCM, Rock School. Any other qualification containing performance at an equivalent level in the same instrument can also be used, but do remember to get it approved when you make your entry. There was a question that came up. What are the benefits if I do this diploma? So I did mention a few earlier, but to put it all in context, it empowers you as a teacher by giving you the means to develop structured teaching. It enables you to practice effective time management, allows for complete transparency in your teaching methodology, and it projects yourself favorably to your stakeholders, which are parents, guardians, schools, academy heads, music school heads, and students themselves, because you have done something which is pertaining to your profession. It increases your standing as a professional because it's an internationally recognized education certificate, and it's an important benchmark in your professional development because it's a stepping stone to moving further to acquire the know-how for attending professional training courses worldwide. So there are a lot of benefits. And as a teacher, you start thinking in a slightly different way when you have studied for this diploma and appeared for it. So at this stage, to take over the qualification format and further, I'd like to invite my colleague and senior academic consultant, Priya Chaturvedi. Priya joins us from Dehradun, and she will take you through the next section.
Thank you, Anjali. Good afternoon, everybody. Some further information about the formats and the requirements of this diploma. So as you can see, it has 2 units, and both of which have been passed to achieve an overall pass. On the right side, the detail, the breakup of what each unit contains has been given. And of course, over the course of today and the next 2 days, we will be looking at all of these in detail. But for now, as an overview, Unit 1 is concerned with your teaching experience, which is codified, that is written down and recorded through materials which are then submitted. Unit 2 is a Viva and a demonstration of your practical skills. The Viva is based with the examiner, of course. It is based on a demonstration that you have done as well as submitted materials from Unit 1. So that is the qualification format. And moving on now to the learning outcomes that we have in this diploma. So learning outcomes, as you would know, are the measurable skills, the abilities, the knowledge, and the values that you are acquiring as a result of completing any course of study. So what are your takeaways from this diploma? Let's have a look. Creativity, very important, your own as well as your students. Communication of your subject knowledge in a coherent manner. planning of your schemes of work, reflection, critical reflection, self-evaluation, self-assessment. These are things that you will have learned in this course of study, and also an awareness of the relevant legislation and professional values. Every profession has its own set of values. We'll be talking more about that later. And legislation such as copyright laws, more about learning outcomes, engaging effective students, showing sensitivity to individual needs. We all know that in music, perhaps more than any other subject, one size does not fit all. And through this course, you will learn how to have different methodologies and how to adapt your teaching strategies to suit individual requirements, and using a variety of styles, executing collaborative work, and always an awareness of all the material that you have, that you're working on as you teach, but in relationship to the music examination, which is a goal that most of us as music teachers have for our students. Let's move on to the next segment now, which is the assessment criteria. Now, assessment criteria, as you can see, these are the attainment descriptors and the percentages assigned to each. Discipline-specific knowledge is 30%. What does it mean? It means that you will be tested on, you will be assessed and marked on the breadth, on the depth of your understanding of concepts, of your using materials of a certain complexity, and your sector knowledge. What is sector knowledge? It's looking at solutions, problems, or the other way around, problems and their solutions, projects, methodology, all these specific to your area or sector. Communication. Confident communicative skills must be demonstrated, both musical and other, and should show a good grasp of concepts and needs and expectations of the recipients of your teaching. In communication, clarity of presentation is very important. That's logically structured material, ideas nicely interlinked, aims put very cohesively together. I'd like to say here, we are music teachers. We are not writers. And there is some apprehension that, what is the use of language? How important? How skillful a writer must I be? The answer is not at all. This is not a test of your writing skills. What is being tested? Your ideas are. Your communication is, your clarity of thought is. So keep it simple, keep it clear. You must use your material in a relevant manner because that is an effective way to communicate. And you must always be appropriate in your selection of a range of approaches to communicate your materials. Now, planning and awareness, again 30%. You have to show a clear awareness of needs in relation to various musical styles, performance events, different teaching environments. All these areas have to be very well rooted in careful planning, in research, and a flexible adaptation of all these materials to suit different purposes. So the aspects that will be assessed in this descriptor are your awareness of context, your preparation and analysis, your own evaluation of the materials, the sources and the resources that you have looked at in preparing your material, and how you are able to reflect and evaluate on these. Finally, we come to integration of skills, carrying 10%. Now, examiners use this descriptor to give a kind of holistic impression of your ability to integrate your skills, bring them together, your skills, your knowledge, your awareness in units 1 and 2 both. So they will assess the degree to which you can produce, that is in unit 1, and present in unit 2, work that shows personal investment, good planning, research, and efficiency in executing. So here we are with assessment criteria. Now we move on to what are the assessment objectives. What are assessment objectives? These are the skills you need to be able to demonstrate very convincingly in your work and in your responses in both the units. In Unit 1, as you can see, what are you going to be assessed on and what must you work towards is your teaching strategies, your personal research, that is very important. Keep it original, though of course you will be looking at various resources. It should be your own thoughts, your own work. That is always appreciated. And the ability to assess yourself and reflect upon your practices and those of others. In Unit 2, there are also assessment objectives, which we can look at now. Knowledge of musical concepts and your teaching techniques. These two really relate to the pedagogy of music teaching, that is the principles of teaching. Communicating and presenting ideas, again, clarity is expected. Professional teaching values, a word here about professional teaching values. Students, as we know, are often reflections of a teacher. We have a great responsibility in following and actively projecting certain core values. We all know what they are. We all have our own set of values. They must be evident in your work, both written and practical. Integrity, patience and understanding, cultural sensitivity, responsibility for imparting knowledge and learning effectively, awareness of the well-being of your students. These are all core values that we as teachers have to show in our profession. Now I shall take you forward into a very quick look at the marking scheme and structure, very simply put there. Unit 1, teaching experience. Unit 2, practical applications. The pass mark here is 60%, and at 80%, you gain a distinction. I'm now going to take you on again back to Anjali, who will be guiding you through Unit 1 and its details.
Thank you very much, Priya, for all this information. I'm sure you all would have found it very, very useful. Please, just in your chat boxes, if you all have passed your grade 8, just put a yes, so that we have an idea how many of you out there have your grade 8s but are looking to do a diploma. So at this point of time, when we go into Unit 1 in details, I would like to welcome our guest speaker for today. So I'm going to stop the screen share and welcome Chanel. Chanel, if you could get your video on. We have with us today giving us first-hand tips on this diploma, Chanel Rodrigues from Mumbai, who is a music teacher. Her subjects are piano and voice, and she has done this diploma, and she is going to share with us what her experiences were so that you may take this forward with ease. Welcome, Chanel.
Thank you, Anjali. I'm glad to be here today to share my experiences with the ATCL, and I hope that there will be many takeaways for the teachers. So I've always looked to enhance my teaching practice, and the ATCL has provided me with a good platform for this.
So Chanel, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and what your future plans are.
So I have previously worked with the Furtado School of Music, and now I am running my own teaching studio in Mumbai. I'm also a student. I am doing a distance postgraduate music education program from a college in the UK. My future plans is that, I've observed that music education in India lacks some structure, and it is one of the reasons why as teachers we are not taken quite as seriously. So in order to change this mindset, I feel that educating ourselves with the music pedagogy and learning to be more professional in our practice is a step in the right direction.
That is absolutely wonderful, and we're so happy to have you here today with us. So without much ado, let's now dive straight back into Unit 1 and take it from there. So, well, Unit 1 is actually all submitted material. Very quickly, there are 4 segments. The first, which is Unit 1.1, is learning and teaching experience. There is a word count given for each of the segments. This is 500 words, and it's your experience as a learner and then as a teacher. The second part is observation of other teachers teaching. This is 1,000 words. Here you need to observe two teachers and in different contexts. And obviously the observation would be 500 for one teacher and 500 for the other. In the third part, we move into the case study. Now, the case study is basically a study of somebody you're teaching, your students, and this is 2,000 words. Again, it has to be two different scenarios. And last of all is original teaching resources. You have to develop two resources which will aid your teaching process and of course give a rationale for it. And this should be 250 words each. So let's unpack these one by one with the help of Chanel. And moving forward, you will learn in this unit to understand the theory behind effective music teaching and your ability to plan. Very important, planning is a big part of it. Minimal teaching experience is needed here, and it's aimed at individual or small group teaching. As I said earlier, the difficulty is at the level of a first year of an undergraduate degree. So to take you forward now, I'm going to hand over to Chanel.
Hello, everyone. So the first point that we'll go over is, as Anjali said, experience as a learner. Now, as we draw from the syllabus, there are a few points to include in your written work of 500 words. And the examples for each point will be covered in the upcoming slides. So the candidate should consider the different contexts in which her learning took place. This could include different teachers, the same teacher through different stages of learning, or even self-taught candidates, because I know a lot of us grew up learning by ourselves. She also might think about the environment in which she has learned, whether she was learning at her teacher's house or whether her teacher came to her house. Looking at the different contexts, she could also identify and analyze the teaching methods and strategies of her teachers, reflecting on the ways that the teaching and learning relationship has impacted her. She could also identify any outstanding features, particularly those that provided motivation to continue and improve. And finally, she should describe the ways in which her own teaching differs from that of her teachers, particularly if she's working in a different context from that in which she has learned. Here is a structure for the written work based on the previous slide. First, covering the different contexts, then bringing in the teaching methods and the strategies, and understanding any outstanding features. Lastly, showing the impact of the learning experience on your own teaching practice and highlighting the teaching strategies you use now. We will now expand on these points over the next few slides.
Before Chanel moves on, I'd just like to say that when she refers to she, it is the candidate. So please be aware of this, that she's talking about the candidate. Yes, Chanel.
So here, let's look at some examples for the first point, which is different contexts. The candidate has provided an example based on 3 different teachers. She's divided her learning into 3 stages as well and has highlighted the different context in each. At the beginner's level, she was taught through a traditional style. It was a solo lesson held once a week at the teacher's house. Next, as she reached an intermediate level, she changed teachers and the context has been highlighted as different because it focused on examinations. When she reached an advanced level exam, She pointed towards a positive experience and saying that she enjoyed the collaboration. The next point here, the candidate expands on the teaching methods and the strategies with the different contexts and highlights the positive and negative aspects of each method. So each lesson consisted of technique and pieces from a method book. The positive is that she developed her sight reading and learned several pieces. However, this approach was limiting as she was not given an opportunity to create or explore music. And the consequence was that there was a loss of interest and she had to be motivated by external factors. The second approach was also analyzed and it was highlighted as being a restrictive one because it was exam centered. Initially, she found the exams easy to understand, but as the grades demanded higher technique and skill, she was not able to cope. And then she also focused on the relationship with her teacher and how this environment impacted that. In the third environment, her teacher used different creative strategies to explain concepts that helped her make connections in the music. The candidate also appreciated the use of demonstration and verbal instruction. When we move on to outstanding features, now in the first two contexts, there might have not been many positive experiences, but there are a lot of takeaways from those contexts as well. The candidate here focuses on the third context, in which she says that the teacher's lessons gave her fresh ideas for teaching. She was encouraged to attend workshops and concerts to build on her learning, which shows some professional development as well. And she finally found herself learning music, musically, and collaboratively.
Chanel, if I may just come in here, did she have any positive takeaways from teacher 1 and 2?
Yes, she did. In the previous slide, as I mentioned, even though the methods were a little more traditional, it did develop on her skill of technique. It improved her sight reading, which is all important in the long run as well.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
And lastly, we have the effect on her teaching, because as a learner, we've had our experiences, and how does that impact our teaching practice now? So the curriculum is now tailored towards the type of lesson and student. There is more collaboration with the student and parent to set expectations and goals. She probably compares this to the first two contexts where she felt there might not have been as much collaboration. She mentions her teaching philosophy, which focuses on teaching proactively, teaching through the piece's features, and making connections. Also highlighting on the materials that she uses, worksheets, games, use of more technology to cover a variety of skills. Lastly, she makes a comparison with her learning experience by saying that as a learner, there were not as many platforms to perform as there are now. So she wants her students to benefit from the opportunities that she did not have and encourage students to perform twice a year at recitals.
We are now going to address the self-taught student and candidate, I would say. And I would like to invite Priya to come in here to speak about this. Meanwhile, for those who have heard Chanel's first segment, Unit 1.1, if you have been taught with a teacher or you are self-taught, could you just put that down in the chat box? We can get maybe some other experiences too. Yes, Priya.
That would be very helpful, Anjali. Definitely getting that kind of input. Yes, so of course there are so many of us, especially in this day and age, who are self-taught, who have found, instead of a live teacher, if I may put it that way, certain resources and sources and self-exploration to learn music. When you're writing your experiences as a learner, and if you're self-taught, you will cover the same areas that you would have with a teacher. So let's say you have different contexts and different stages of learning. So what are the common ways that we do begin our acquaintance with music? We explore through listening to available music in audio and video. These can be written about. beginning the first experiments with sounds or learning to play an instrument. Could be something like a harmonium in the house, a xylophone that children like to play around with, basic percussion instruments. These are some of the ways one can have the early stages of learning music. Going on to watching videos online and acquiring apps which are so well available nowadays. There's Prime Phonic or Idagio for classical music. Listening and watching curated podcasts about music, attending concerts both online and live, and of course, subscribing to a variety of online courses. So these are the contexts and stages of learning that you can write about in your experiences. And examples of online courses, of course, if you're a piano student, you could maybe write about Zebra Keys, which has an interactive piano keyboard. For music theory, there is Theoria and others. For ear training and recognition of chords and scales, building up your oral skills, there are devices, there are courses, there is theater music training, for example, sight reading. If you have a Mac device, the GarageBand tutorials. I'm giving you these as an example. And of course, having written about them, the sources that you employed in lieu of a teacher or as a teacher, you must be able to then evaluate them. What were their outstanding features? What was your learning? What was your takeaway? A good analysis and evaluation of these sources is expected. And of course, the effects that these have had on your own teaching. After evaluating them, what worked for you? What was most effective for you? There are so many resources available for those who are self-taught, and it will be expected that you will record these just the way you would otherwise in your experiences as a learner, unit 1.1. So we can now move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya. That was really useful. And I'd just like to add one thing here. You don't need to have had a teacher in your process of your music learning.
Right.
So you could, this is a very, very common scenario today when there is so much available as in the way of videos and apps and technology. You could very well be self-taught and become an excellent teacher. So the people who are self-taught could also approach this diploma very easily. Right, so now we are going to move back to the main exam, and this part is observation of other teachers. A great learning process. When you observe others teaching, there is a lot you gain from it. And this is unit 1.2. And we need to submit here, the candidate should submit a written report of approximately 1,000 words of the observation. There should be at least 2 contexts, 2 instrumental vocal teachers who should have been observed in different settings, and 1 student minimum per teacher over 3 lessons. Now, a total of 10 hours is required. So minimum 3 lessons should be there, but it all depends. You have to have 5 hours for one context and 5 hours for the other one. So whatever the number of lessons is, that fits into this. And what the work that you do has to be confirmed by the teacher you have observed with a copy of the appropriate pro forma, which we'll talk about in the rules and regulations. So I'm going to get Chanel back now again to address 1.2. But before that, let us just have a look at the structure. Chanel had told you about the structure in unit 1.1. In 1.2, it's a little more elaborate. There is, of course, the context and physical environment. And by the side, we have put an approximate number of words so that it adds up to 500 each. The student's learning level, 50 words or less, lesson structure and activity, and the time allotted to each activity. Obviously, that will have more of a word count. Musical concepts covered, and teaching methods and strategies, which is the main part of the lesson. and what was the effect on the students' learning, whether it was solo or group, what was the effect on the learning, and a little summary at the end. So the summary and all these word counts which lead to the summary are approximate. So, but you do need to keep a check on it. So take over, Chanel, now.
Thank you. All right, so we will be diving into those points with a few examples. The first one focuses on the context. So over here, the candidate shares that she was observing a group class at a school and with 5 lessons being observed. Next, we have the environment. It was spacious, well lit, and there are details about the instruments. In this case, there were 2 acoustic pianos and 5 keyboards. It is, and since this diploma is for a variety of instrumentalists, so it can be a different context as well with different set of instruments. There is the level of the students that are also included in this observation with their grades and books. In this case, the candidate has said that the students have been learning for 1 to 3 years from the Alfred Primer series, and that they use the Paul Harris books as well as the Trinity books. When we discuss the lesson structure and the activity and time management, the candidate states how the teacher has divided the lesson with oral, technique, theory, and repertoire. She highlights how the teacher has spent longer time on a particular activity and gives a possible reason for it. Over here, she says that giving feedback on repertoire, as she needs to cover many students in the lesson. She says that oral is an important part of the lesson and what the teacher spends most of her time. A lot of expression is displayed through the activities conducted in class. The candidate also draws conclusions on time management, saying that it is used very effectively, as the students are always seen doing something musical in class, whether it's singing or tapping, playing or moving to music. Over here, when we cover the musical concepts and the teaching strategies, she covers oral, theory, technique, and gives details as to what was working. In the oral activity, students were given the opportunity to internalize the music and demonstrate the features of the piece, such as time signature, dynamics, form, articulation, etc., through actions or movements. And she also says that it encompasses oral, visual, and kinesthetic learning. So she is reflecting on the type of strategy used, the concepts that are taught in general music pedagogy. While covering theory, she uses a large group as an advantage. She divides them into small groups and assigns roles. This keeps the activity quite interesting and encourages building basic ensemble skills. The candidate notices that scales form most part of the technical work in the lesson. The teacher uses singing and certain rhymes for students to remember the formation of the scales, and it makes technical work rather a fun activity. The candidate also analyzes the teaching strategies which the teacher has used most and its effect on the students. Each activity in the teacher's class was well communicated with the music itself rather than the teacher doing all the talking. The teacher is highly energetic and motivating to all her students in class. And she also appreciates the teacher doing a lot of demonstration during the lesson to highlight the feedback she is given for the repertoire. And also that the teacher uses scaffolding to build confidence in her pupils, like playing a duet part to keep the student in time or singing the melody while they play. Lastly, we're looking at student learning, because that is something that you do have to analyze over the period of the lessons that you are observing. And over here, the students have learned a wide range of concepts and repertoire through these lessons. They reflected on their work regularly and tried different strategies to improve their work. The candidate then provides a summary of her experience, saying that she enjoyed seeing the amount of activities and the productivity and the learning in the lesson. This demonstrated a good holistic ideology to teaching music and will help her enhance her own teaching practice. So in these slides, we have covered what you could include in your 1,000 words. Now you must be wondering, how do I build up these 1,000 words? Where's my data for all of this? So one might want to keep a record of your observations. Make notes while you are observing the teacher so that later you can compile it and structure it as we've discussed previously. The notes are not part of your word count and they will go in the appendix. For that, you can use different formats. Here are 2 examples for the first format. So example 1 is that I see the student A hesitating a lot when she plays hands together in her piece. Teacher A notices this and encourages her to play slowly and focus on the pattern of the notes. This is a good strategy, and student A seemed to be getting more familiar towards the end of the class. So over here, the candidate has taken note of what she has seen and how it was addressed in the teacher and student interaction and what she thinks about it. She will also make a note to check this progress next lesson. In example 2, teacher A has moved on to an oral exercise and has instructed the students to indicate the pulse by walking around the room while she is playing. The students have understood her instructions clearly as they start walking the pulse as soon as she starts the music. Some students take their time, but teacher A plays for a while and observes how the students are responding to the music. And the reflection is that there is good communication between the teacher and the students. Another way of also taking notes of your observation is through a tabulated format. You can write out your context, which remains the same for the lessons, and the notes on the pupils. This might change or might remain the same depending on how the pupil has progressed. And the time that you have, the time that the lesson has started and is progressing. The event, that means what you have seen the teacher doing, and your comments, that is your reflection on the event that has happened. At the end of this document, you might want to add some concluding comments, just a reflection of the entire class.
Okay, that was great. And I'd just like to mention here, this is not really mentioned in the syllabus that you have to submit the observation. Chanel, if you could just stay on for a moment. So this is not mentioned there, but I think you will all realize that when you're observing somebody, to come to a conclusion and a summary of the observation, you do need a detailed step-by-step document of what happened in the class. This is very detailed. You could have it like this, you could be shorter, whichever way you like, but this is proof of the fact that you have been there in these classes and you have observed every little detail, which is very good practice. It's very good teaching practice when you're observing somebody to have it down. And this is submitted. This is not marked, but this is submitted as an appendix. So we're going to move on here. Chanel, when you wrote your summary, how did this help you, this documentation?
So you write your summary after a couple of weeks. So to really compile and remember and see how each point has sort of progressed through these lessons, it's good to have this data with you. So that really helped me. And since you're observing 2 teachers, you don't want to have to mix up the strategies and concepts. So it's always good to have separate observation notes for each.
Absolutely. So the record is really, really important. Thank you, Chanel. Here are a few tips about writing the observation. Please make sure you don't copy paste from somewhere. You have to understand what you are writing about. You don't have to use very high-flown language. As Priya said, keep it simple, but let all the information be there. Your material should be divided into paragraphs. It's easier to read. You must have some reflection and evaluation of what you've written. check the word count. There should be an introduction and a conclusion. And there is one more thing that is very important. You have to include references and appendix. So references would be really the books you have read, the articles you have read about teaching, and that you have referred to when writing this summary of observation. What you need to submit here is the main document, that is the summary, 2 teachers, 500 words each, the references that I spoke about, and bibliography. Bibliography meaning giving credit to the people whose books you have read or articles or any videos you have watched, and the appendix, which is the detailed observation notes. So we've taken this really slow and done unit 1.1 and 1.2. I did not put a checklist in unit 1.1 because there is just one thing to submit there. Of course, if you have read up something which has affected your writing, please, you can put the references there. So with that, we come to the end of these 2 units. We would like you to go back and reflect on what we have said today, referring to the syllabus, and have some questions ready which you can put into the question box as soon as you get in tomorrow. And tomorrow we will continue with part 2, which will be structured something like this. It will have a review of part 1 when we can talk about some of the questions you've put in. We will discuss 1.3, which is the case study. We will discuss 1.4, where you are developing an original teaching resource. And we will also talk about rules and regulations for entering this exam. And of course, on day 3, we will concentrate on unit 2 of this qualification. So I do hope you have enjoyed today's inputs. I'd like to say a big thank you to Chanel for all that she's worked really hard with us and really educated us to design this whole thing. And we're really happy that she's with us and will be with us for the next 2 days. I looked at one of the questions and it said that Chanel is also a violin teacher. I'm sorry, I missed that out. So she is a talented musician teacher. So I'm going to stop the screen share and quickly look at any questions. We have about 10 minutes, so that's a good thing. And I'd request Priya and Chanel also to get onto the questions. Of course, first in the beginning.
We have...
yeah, Priya, can you take some of these?
Yes, I'm just seeing if there's something that requires a specific, well, there is, how do I prepare for the ATCL exam? Specific study material, a guidebook, syllabus. Well, the syllabus, of course, we have given you a link. When you look at...
We'll be giving you a link to the reading material.
We will be giving
at the end of the webinars. You will have access to the recordings. There is no book that you can really study from because this is at a level where you should be doing self-study and getting...
Yes, and I said very clearly even in the syllabus that personal research, personal experience, these are the things that are very important in your assessment objective and also your own evaluation. So do look at all the resources that are available. We'll give you a list. Do look at online resources and look at the attainment descriptors and what each segment of each unit requires. And I think that will guide you sufficiently well, certainly.
Yes, you will get a recording of the webinar. I mean, all 3 sessions, you will have a recording. I agree. There is somebody saying in this COVID situation, we cannot go and do an observation, but there are other aspects you can prepare for during this time and wait for the COVID to pass over. We are very hopeful it's going to go away very soon. As soon as it came, the way it came, it's going to vanish. Positive thinking. And what you could do is leave the observation. You could work on the case study with your students, your learning and teaching experience, and the resources. Once that is all ready, You just have to wait till everything opens up and you could do the next part of it. So we will talk about that in the rules and regulations again. We will send you a PDF of the slides. There will be no write-up of this webinar, and the recording will be there for you to refer to. You could consult Chanel for guidance. Of course, that would be not related to Trinity, but in Chanel's capacity as a teacher.
We have a question from Sujeev, who's
Yeah.
asking, he's completed his 6th grade. No, we had said earlier, to go directly to your ATCL, you must hold a grade 8. Would be or an equivalent from any board, not just Trinity, from any other examination board, the equivalent of a grade 8, or an equivalent qualification from any other board or college. But grade 6 you have written, you will need to have a grade 8 or equivalent. That is the minimum requirement.
Anything in the chat that...
I don't think I saw anything in the chat. It was...
Yes, there are people who have said that observation could be easy here. You could do it over Zoom, but you'd need all sorts of permissions, and the teacher and the student are also not present together. So I don't know how effective that kind of an observation will be.
Ketan, no, an ATCL is not equivalent to a bachelor's degree. It is equivalent to the first year of undergraduate course, and LTCL is equivalent to a bachelor's.
Third year. Actually, it's equivalent to a third year of the undergraduate course. So if there is nothing more, I think we can sign off.
Diploma after rock and pop? No, there isn't. Not for rock and pop.
Not at the moment.
Currently
we hope to be working towards it. And if you have any suggestions, please feel free to mail them to us or put it tomorrow when you come in to the chat box. I will open up the webinar about 5 minutes before time tomorrow so that we can be prepared to talk a little.
Yes.
Not literally talk, we will talk, you will type.
Yes, so yes, you can appear from Bahrain, and yes, the minimum age is 18. For 2 more questions.
Yes.
I think that brings us to, I think all the queries have been addressed. Anything that has been left out, we will certainly take up again.
There's one question here which says, how long can this be a valid time once we enroll and have to wait for Unit 2? I will be addressing this in the rules and regulations. I will be talking more about it. And Diganta is saying if there has been a negative impact which has made me want to physically... Yes, you've answered that?
Yes, I have answered that, and I hope that was all right, Diganta. That my answer was certainly please give a reflection and evaluation of all learning experiences, good, bad, and different.
I did mean to say this also during the presentation, that everything doesn't have to be positive. Your observation doesn't have to be positive. Your learning experience doesn't always have to be correct, or, you know, it can have a negative effect. So it's good to put all this down because it has been your journey. It's your journey that you have taken in your learning process. And also when you're observing, if you see something negative, you can report on it and you can think about how it could have been made positive.
Yes, I think Chanel also did bring that out.
Yes, she did bring that out.
As Anjali said, it's a journey. And so you should, the important thing is that you should be able to evaluate and assess that journey in its various aspects.
Yes, electronic keyboard grade 8, I said, especially for electronic keyboard grade 8s and rock and pop, because they don't have diplomas in those subjects. So the teaching diploma is very relevant here.
I would also say here that even if you are looking at a performance diploma, since most of you are attending and most of us are teachers, even if we are performers, I think this by itself is a wonderful and valuable diploma to have. It makes a difference to your daily practice as a teacher. And it's all right to have a performance diploma, but even if it is available, do look at this diploma as well.
Because how many of us are really performing, sitting with recital diplomas? How many are really performing? And what have we learned from the performance diploma? Yes, musically we have benefited a lot by doing the pieces and knowing how to perform and choosing a program. But we are teaching. All of us here are teaching. So the information that you get by preparing a teaching diploma is really what is relevant in this situation.
Yes.
So we'll sign off now. Thank you very much. And I hope to see all of you back tomorrow because we've got a lot more interesting stuff for you. Thank you and see you soon. Have people trickling in slowly. I will stop the sharing and look at the couple of questions that we have. Priya, have you been able to see the questions?
Yes, I have. And can we use online learning as an observation of teachers? I think we need to check up about this. These are unusual times and we will get back and update you about this. After doing the ATCL diploma, can I further do LTCL and FTCL? You can certainly do an LTCL in vocal or instrumental teaching. The FTCL diploma is in music education and the parameters there are quite different. But ATCL and LTCL are following the same criteria and the same unit breakup. So yes, you can.
Somebody is saying they can't hear anything. Are you on mute, Priya? No.
I'm not on mute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's fine. This is
Okay, so I'll repeat the answer. Yes, you can certainly do your LTCL after taking this if you are a teacher of electronic keyboard. The FTCL diploma is in music education. Criteria and parameters there are quite different. So that will have to be looked at absolutely separately. But after the ATCL, certainly you can follow it up with an LTCL.
If I'm not mistaken, the FTCL has been withdrawn, the music education.
It was there until 2019.
It's not in the syllabus.
In the latest syllabus, perhaps it has
in
been
the
withdrawn.
teaching diploma syllabus, it doesn't appear. So it may have been withdrawn. But I think take it step by step, ATCL, then the LTCL, and then we will see. Maybe the FTCL will be back.
Yes.
Please don't raise your hand. If you would like to say something, please just put it in the box. And this question about observation, online observation, there have been several queries about this, and we will definitely check. If we get the correct permissions from the people involved, I don't think it should be a problem.
Yes.
So we have also posted the syllabus again, the link to the syllabus, as well as the reading suggestions.
Yes.
Now, just a word here, the reading suggestions in the resources in our syllabus are books which may be quite expensive. So Chanel will share with you a little later what she used for her reading resources and how she got hold of them. Why not do it now, Chanel, before we begin?
All right. So yeah, the reading resources, of course, have been prescribed by the board. However, being in India, sometimes these books are difficult to obtain. But you can use other resources that are available. Like we have the Paul Harris series, which is a good pedagogical resource that we can use, and any other articles that you find online or any books on instrumental teaching. You can use a variety of sources besides the references that are given.
Quite right. So there is quite a lot available online, as well as the Paul Harris, I would like to reiterate, is a great, great resource to go through. And somehow I find that, I don't know if you agree with me, Chanel and Priya, that the Paul Harris way of writing and his, directions and all are very similar to what we do here in India. I find it it's
Yes.
fit to purpose kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think it's he puts things across very well and they're very suitable for our conditions and our context here
Yes.
in India. Absolutely, I agree. So that is I would recommend that highly as well.
I have said this before also, you'll get access to all the PPTs. All three of them will be sent to you in a PDF form. We have all your email IDs, and you will also get access to the recording of this webinar, the 3 days. So don't worry about that. In case it's missed out or something, please do feel free to write to us. Tomorrow we'll be giving you our email IDs at the end of the session. So I think we don't have very much more here. So
there was someone wanting to know about the results. When will I get the results? Well,
yeah, Anthony Matthew. Well, this is something you can check with your local center where you made your entry from, and I'm guessing this is for the digital exam that happened now.
no, I think it is about the results of the diploma.
Which diploma?
Oh, there was a question I saw that
Yeah,
when
it's
will
gone away now.
It's gone away.
Uh,
ATCL he has written, Anthony Matthew has written. He wants to know when we will get the result for an ATCL teaching diploma. So as Anjali said, Anthony, you need to be in touch with your local area representative from where the candidate will be making the entry, and they will keep you updated about when results for unit 1 and 2 will be given.
So I think I will be covering that in the rules and regulations today.
Yes, all
about
that will
how
be
the
launched.
results come. That will be part of our webinar today. So now I think we're going to move straight into the webinar. There's lots of interesting stuff for you today. I will just share screen and let's begin right away. So this is part 2 of the ATCL teaching, music teaching, instrumental and vocal. So here now today, this is what we are going to do. We've already done a review of part 1, which you saw, you heard, whatever questions were there, we answered. You do know that the part 1 addressed unit 1.1 and 1.2, which was the learning of the candidate and the observation of teachers for their part 2, unit 1.2. Today we are going to go into something a little more detailed. It's unit 1.3, which is a case study. Now, what is a case study? A lot of people, this word is there in all dissertations, whenever you're doing a postgraduate, whenever you're doing a graduation. A case study is just a record of research into the development of a person or group over a period of time. It's really an observation which is written out over a period of time. And you do it all the time as teachers. What you're teaching, how you're teaching it, you do keep a record of that. So that is a case study. Unit 1.4 is the teaching resource. You have to develop 2 original teaching resources as part of Unit 1.4, which should be used in your teaching. We have a lot of details and examples on that. And at the end of this section, we will go into the rules and regulations for entry. So before I call Chanel to take this forward, I will just go over what is involved in the case study. The case study must be based on 2 environments, 2 different contexts in which the candidate has worked as a teacher. And it should include the student's overview and context, musical backgrounds, abilities, experience, and aspiration. It should also involve some assessment, which is of needs, and set objectives for these needs. This could be for a small group lesson or an individual lesson. There should be a plan of work with simple activities and repertoire, giving reasons for choices. Also, the student should be encouraged to evaluate their own performance. It should not be a one-way street. Finally, the teacher should also reflect critically upon his or her practice and adjust it in the light of experience according to what you have experienced during this case study. Adjustments generally always need to be made. So to take us forward about writing this case study, I'm now going to invite Chanel to go ahead.
Thank you, Anjali. So now, how do we go about this case study? You have to remember that the student is at the heart of this case study. So first, get to know your student, his musical background, and more importantly, his needs. Your objectives should be based on those needs. And based on that, you plan activities and repertoire, all focusing around this objective. Also remember to encourage and show them how to evaluate their performance. Now I will expand on Anjali's points that she had mentioned with a few examples. First is the overview and context. Over here in my case study, the context is described as a transfer student who was with me for 1 year. And I've mentioned the books that he uses currently, which is the Alfred series or the Trinity books or any online resources that I've been using. I've also spoken a little bit about his nature, that he is a quiet and hardworking teenager. There are also a few points on what he does with his music outside of his lessons, such as participates in school music programs, is part of the school choir, and is sung at different venues. Next, we have assessing needs and setting precise objectives. Here I've highlighted the most important needs for the student and why I feel so. Through the year, I have observed that he finds sight reading rather challenging. I also feel that his oral skills can be strengthened and not just restricted to exam syllabi. Adding to his oral skills, I would also like to explore improvisation in our lessons. This would help in a deeper understanding of the character of the piece. I also say that I will analyze my teaching methods to see the effectiveness of my approach, and that he comes in once a week for 1 hour. And these points will be the basis of my planning over the next few lessons. The objectives here are specific, which we will cover over the next few slides. Here I have spoken about the first objective for the solo student. Over the time frame of 5 lessons, I have assessed student progress and analyzed what was working. My main aim over the course of 5 lessons was to help Raj recognize patterns, shapes, and structures to pave way for easy reading. To make it less intimidating, we followed a step-by-step approach, tackling one concept at a time using the Paul Harris sight reading book. Now, next I have sort of given a lesson-by-lesson analysis. Over the first and second lesson, I have spoken about a teaching strategy, focusing on building a steady beat through the rhythm exercise before each stage in the book, and then tapping them using both hands. Initially, we approached exercises in the key of C major, G major, and A minor. Since these keys were familiar to Raj, he was able to identify the chords, the structures, and patterns quite easily. However, as we reached the key of D minor and changing hand position, we needed to do a few more exercises to establish these concepts. As you can see, I've made note of the tasks that were attainable for Raj and also those that were not and needed a little bit more work. Every lesson you are reflecting to see what you can do better next. So by lesson 4, Raj started getting comfortable with sight reading and the keys that were done so far. And we could also incorporate some character into the short pieces. We had already covered intervals in the previous lesson, so recognizing them for sight reading just needed a revision. I've concluded saying that by the 5th lesson, Raj was able to incorporate all the elements and felt more comfortable with sight reading. Another aim was to develop Raj's listening skills, his orals. It was done with connection to the improvisation styles and based on the features of the piece. Improvisation was my third objective, which we will get to later. Initially, I focused on listening and singing the major intervals, and Raj replaced some tracks with his own songs. When we were listening to the tracks in the Paul Harris series, I found that singing the notes in order and then skipping the inner notes helped him become more aware of the interval and its sound. I've also written to see the appendix, lesson 1, where I have highlighted this in my reflection. By the third lesson, we played a candy bingo game, which is an interval game to consolidate the interval recognition. To recognize the features of the piece, I focused on the pieces of music we were using for the improvisation activity, as we would be able to cover a range of musical concepts. I would show Raj a few videos and he would pick the appropriate listening cards to discuss further. And we focused on these particular concepts like time signature, articulation, dynamics, and mood. The third objective, as I've said, is improvisation. We were building on the activities conducted during oral, which led me to the aim of developing Raj's improvisation skills with a special focus on style. We used Forrest Kinney's Create First series because it was a good resource to understand different moods of the piece, and I focused on 3 styles, which is march, tango, and waltz. While noting down the characteristics of oral skills, we made sure to include them in our improvisation exercises. A revision of primary chords was required in lesson 4 so that Raj could play his improvisation, keeping the keys in mind. I would play an accompaniment and he was required to play a melody on top of that in the style given to him. This is also my teaching method and my strategies. Now, how have I reflected on this? While these exercises and visual aids did seem to improve Raj's understanding of the style, he would still need a few more basic activities and exercises to be entirely confident with this concept. So I am assessing my students' future needs here as well. This objective is an example from the group study. As you know, your case study is in 2 different environments. The first 3 objectives were for the solo student. Here we are covering an objective for a group class of 3 students, ages between 10 to 12 years. Over here, the objective is to develop, to improve understanding of musical features through theory. The group lesson was conducted over 10 lessons, and the analysis is as follows. I felt the need to start from the basics that included formation and playing major and minor scales. By the 6th lesson, the student had also written out sentences to remember the order of the sharps, flats, and placement on the staff. Lesson 7 onwards, I started combining their theoretical knowledge to their composition exercises. We started discussing and writing primary chords on manuscript paper and in their pieces to identify form. Also over here, you see I have connected this objective to another objective in my case study. We also played the key trail learning resource to consolidate the theory concepts covered in these 10 lessons. The key trail resource is my original resource, which we will further discuss in unit 1.4 of this diploma. The connection between theory and practical gave a more holistic learning experience, which I would like to continue in their future lessons as well. This was something positive that I wanted to include going ahead with these students. As you conclude, you can give a summary of your 3 objectives. So for the solo lesson, over the course of 5 lessons, Raj had learned to approach sight reading in a less stressful and a more structured manner by focusing on the ingredients of the piece. I was able to cover the essential components needed for an early intermediate level of sight reading. Raj's oral skill knowledge has broadened by listening to a number of tracks. He was listening more actively to spot specific features in the piece. The improvisation activity helped Raj to build on his creativity. However, I feel more activities in this regard should be ongoing to maintain good progress. I hope to continue and build on these ideas so that we can incorporate them in his lessons regularly. For the group lesson, focusing on the theoretical aspect, the use of learning, writing, and playing has given them a deeper understanding in noticing the keys and structure of the piece. I hope that this will help in developing sight reading as well. As you can see, there have been some positives and also some takeaways for us. The objectives and that you set out in the beginning, the analysis that you have made is important. Even if the objectives took longer time or the student needed a longer time to achieve those objectives, that is okay, as students have different learning capabilities.
Thank you, Chanel. That was very detailed and very useful. I'd just like to quickly summarize it a little bit because there was a lot of content there and it will take a little time to sink in. The first thing you need to remember is that you must have a plan, and that plan should be based on your objective for the student. The needs of students are all different. You can't replicate two students in the objectives. It's generally one may need help in sight reading, one may need it in improvisation, one may need it in interpretation of the pieces, and several other things which you are all aware of. I'm sure you know this all as teachers. When you approach this exam, all you really need to do is get your thoughts together in a structured form. We should not be going around in circles, as Chanel showed you, and you will get examples of this. Of course, do not copy her examples. This was her work, but you can take the guidelines from there. How you introduce the problem, what you did to address it, what you wanted the child to achieve, and how much you succeeded in your objective. So that is extremely important. And it's not a lot of words that you have really. It's 1,000 words for each of the studies, the case studies. So you have to be really frugal with your words, yet get your meaning across. So here's a little checklist of what you need to submit with this unit 1.3. The case study, of course, which is a document of your own teaching experience. 2 case studies, 1,000 words each, adding up to 2,000. As before, as we saw in the observation and learning experience, references and bibliography. And along with that, the appendix will contain your lesson plans over the 10 lessons or 5 lessons, as long as it adds up to the number of hours mentioned. So the lesson plans are not marked, but they are a proof. As I said before, your observation details are not marked. Your summary is here, your case study is, but the lesson plans are a proof of the work you have put in as a teacher towards writing your case study. So please do include them. It's necessary. So now we're going to move on to unit 1.4, very interesting unit. And Priya is going to take you forward with Chanel here. Also, if you have any thoughts from the case study, I'll give you a moment or two if you want to put in any questions, any of your ideas. It would be very welcome because we are all teachers who'd like to share with each other what we are doing in our practice. And often we learn a lot. Just now when Chanel mentioned the teaching of intervals, where she left out the middle note between 2 notes and had them sing the first and the third note, I thought, what a good idea that was. I really haven't used that, because teaching an interval that way is very useful rather than singing the next note and the next note. You sing alternate notes or you leave out 2 notes in between. So we always getting ideas from each other, which is important. We must learn from each other. We must share with each other, because we are all in the same profession and our end aim is to offer the best learning to our students. So go ahead now, Priya, with the original teaching resources.
Yeah, thank you, Anjali. So original teaching resources, as the name implies, is something that you will have created as a support and an aid to your teaching and to be applied in each of the 2 teaching contexts environments that have been described in your case study. So let's look at some examples. What kind of resources, from where could you take or make these resources? It could be a composition, a piece of music that you have written or arranged. It could be something as practical as a movement exercise or a game. It could be a visual aid. It could show a really creative use of ICT. ICT is information and communications technologies, a very rich area for you to explore as teachers. It would, of course, imply the use of computers, of audiovisual systems, of enterprise software. In short, everything that it would enable users to store, to manipulate, and to transmit information. Each of these examples, each resource that is, should have a short description, approximately 250 words. And in these words, you have to cover the following: the reason why you have development, the element of music that you're going to be applying it to, the purpose for the development, the activities that you are going to build around it, and how you could take this resource forward and develop it further. So we can see here what is an original resource. We already know that. Do, when you're developing it, look at the student's need. For example, when Chanel was talking about her 3 objectives with her solo student, he had specific needs which she had targeted, and her resource was developed addressing those needs. Work to what you are comfortable with. Work in the area that you feel is your strongest area, be it a written composition, be it a dance-related exercise, or be it something that you have made as a form of a game. It should be effective, so do try it out with your students to first evaluate how effective it is and then tinker around with it and develop into a really useful resource. Now the description, the 250 words, which is not really a very big word count, so do be very economical and very relevant in your writing. Give a quick overview. List out your objectives. What do you aim to achieve through this resource? What are the materials you're using? Are you using listening aids? Are you using a piece of cardboard in which you're going to write something? Are you going to use flashcards? Whatever. The instructions that the students will be given with this resource. And finally, of course, how are you going to build a resource and take it 1 or more steps further? So right now I'm going to ask Chanel, who will be coming in shortly. But before that, when you're looking at these topics, do also take a moment now to list down some topics that you may have in mind. Put it on chat so that we can all share our inputs. As you can see, already listed here is improvisation, theory through key signatures or time signatures or any other aspect of the structure of music, oral resources, rhythm, and sight reading. So do put down some of your own ideas. We would love to share them with all of us. And we will go on now to getting Chanel, who will explain her resources. Thank you, Chanel.
Thank you, Priya. So as I had mentioned in my case study, I used a key trail resource, and this is the resource which is a truth or dare game, which discusses major and minor keys to develop their theoretical understanding. The game has been made for the students in the group case study, and the objectives were for them to quickly to identify the major or minor key signatures up to 3 sharps or flats, to learn to draw and write the key signatures, scales, arpeggios, or the chords of the given keys, and to also play them on the piano. The materials that I needed for this resource was the game board, the circular fifths chart, which is not mentioned here, which is not seen in the picture, but in the picture you can see the cards as well, which is the truth and dare cards, the game tokens, and the die as well. You can also have manuscript paper, you can have pencils and erasers. The instructions for this resource is that the players place their game tokens on start. Players take turns to roll the die. They move their game token according to the number on the die. Depending on where they land, they pick a truth or dare card. If they pick a truth card, they answer the question on the given card. Such as over here in the example, what is the relative major of B minor? If they pick a dare card, they can do the assigned activity on either manuscript paper or on the whiteboard or on the piano. Over here in the example, it says play a 2-octave E natural minor scale. There are also a few riddle cards in the truth and dare packs. If a student picks this, they either have an advantage or disadvantage ahead in moving ahead in the game. The game is over when a player reaches the end. Further development for these cards is that more cards can be added according to the level of the student. Here I have covered up to 3 sharps or flats, but you can go on and include more according to the circular fifths. Here is a resource for the solo student in the case study, which focuses on improvisation. It is a themed resource for Halloween. First, so you can see that there are some cards here which can be printed out and cut. The student can practice saying the sentences and clapping the corresponding rhythms. Using the notes in the C minor scale, the student picks the Halloween cards and starts creating a melody with the rhythms. I have used C minor here is because it is focused on my student in the case study and he is currently learning C minor as well. To start turning this into a haunting duet, the student can choose more Halloween improvisation cards. The teacher plays the following accompaniment, while students can play around on the piano with their chosen cards. A further development can be that more cards can be added and more complex rhythms can be added. Students can also add their own sentences and rhythms and make their own pack of cards. Here is an example of ICT, as Priya mentioned. Some of you might be very familiar with technology and you can use that to your advantage. Over here, the teacher probably was doing a piece or like a tango or any Latin style and decided to create a few backing tracks for additional styles that he wanted the student to be familiar with. The student can improvise on these tracks. So let's hear them. Next, we can hear the tango. as you can see, the tango had a very distinctive rhythm. Tum, pa-tum, pum, pum. So you can explain this to the student. Teacher can do it, and it has a little laid back character, this particular tango, which can be incorporated into the improvisation. Further development of this improvisation over here, there is a focus on Latin styles, but we can expand and go further into different styles and dances of different types of music, even rock music or classical music, and we can also create longer improvisations to challenge the student.
Thank you, Chanel. That was very interesting. I have one more resource that I'd like to share with you here. And this has been sent to us. It has been developed by a young Delhi-based teacher, Akriti Gupta. So Akriti has come up with an incredibly innovative game, which is a rhythm magnet board to have in the classroom. Now you can see over there, the little magnets can be used in a multitude of ways. You can use it creatively, you can use it as a theory teaching tool for notes and rest values. You can move the little notes values around and create a melody using that rhythm. You can use it for rhythmic improvisation. When learning a new piece or song, the teacher can, put the rhythm patterns over there and, examine how the rhythm moves to a given melody, and lots of scope over there too for collaborative work, for teamwork, for group work. And finally, of course, it has got immense possibilities for development. You can take the time signature, which is 2, 4, 3, 4, and so forth, and take it, for example, you can put in irregular time signatures. You can put further note values. So this one little rhythm magnet board serves a huge bunch of needs and is a very, very creative teaching tool. And I hope it gives you some ideas to develop your own.
So those were some very great ideas about 1.4, Unit 1.4. And before we move on now to rules and regulations, why don't you put down in the chat box some ideas of your own that you do use within your classroom and you have developed yourself. It would be a great help. I'm sure we all use some kind of tools in our teaching. And do remember, I do notice that the chat is sometimes going just to the panelists. Remember to choose the attendees and panelists button. So do put down some ideas before we go into a rather mundane and rules and regulations where we need to really pay attention as to what we need to do. So definitely, as with all examinations, there will be a set of rules. Now, this is an exam in 2 units, and we need to be aware what we need to do. Of course, this is all available on the syllabus, the PDF of the syllabus. You can see the rules are all there, but I just thought we would talk these through once. The order of entry, first of all. Candidates need to enter for both units at the same time. But please use a separate entry form for Unit 1 and a separate one for Unit 2, but the fees needs to be paid together. If either unit is not passed, it may be entered again. Entries must all be sent to your local Trinity office or your local area representative and must be accompanied by appropriate forms from the back of the syllabus. On the last 2 pages of the syllabus, there are some forms which we'll look at a little later. Looking at the submitted material, when you make your entry for this diploma, your submitted material must be included with the entry. So the whole of Unit 1 needs to be there with the entry, which means your learning experience, your observation, your case study, as well as your original resource. Now, when you're developing your original resource, do make sure it's something that can be packed and sent to London, because it has to go to London. So be careful. The magnetic board is a great idea, but it should be smaller. It will have to go to London. And 2 copies of all written materials should be sent. Ideally, 1 hard copy and 1 electronic copy. Safety copy always to be kept with the candidate in case something gets lost or your computer crashes. Materials will be returned to the candidate, normally with or after the results. As far as Unit 2 of the exam goes, it has to be done in a live situation, face-to-face. The venue will be the same as the local Trinity venue. However, if you have chosen to do a group teaching as one, using that as one of your case studies and demonstrating that, you may need to have the venue at your school or academic school, music or academic school. But mostly this applies to the LTCL, where there is group teaching to be demonstrated. Moving on, if you do not clear one of the units of the examination, it can be retaken. If Unit 1 is to be retaken, then all submitted materials must be sent by registered post directly to Trinity's central office for marking. If Unit 2 is to be retaken, the submitted materials must be presented in exactly the same way as before, which means at the time of entering for Unit 2, for the information of the examiner conducting the practical exam. Though if Unit 1 has previously been passed, no changes will be made to the marking. So do understand this very, very clearly. If Unit 1 is to be retaken, you will send the material, the submitted material, directly by post to Trinity's central office, that is the London office. Address can be got from your local area representative. If Unit 2 is to be retaken, you enter in exactly the same way. You pay the fees for Unit 2 only, and you give your submitted material at the time of entry to the Trinity office. So it's the same process to be followed. Of course, Unit 1 will not be assessed, but as you will see tomorrow when we do the Unit 2, material from Unit 1 is used in the Viva and in the other tests of Unit 2. So the examiner needs that submitted material to be able to conduct the Viva correctly. Results will be released independently for each unit, following normal procedures, and will not be retained by Trinity pending the completion of the full examination requirements. A certificate will only come after both the units have been successfully completed. And as always with Trinity, we welcome entries from candidates with special educational needs. So this is a bit about the rules and regulations. I'm going to show you the forms that are needed to be filled. These are at the back of the syllabus, and you can print them out. The first is an authentication form for submitted materials, that is Unit 1. So the submitted material may include the case study, composition, videos, all your resources. Check the syllabus to ensure that you've enclosed all the materials. A separate form should be submitted with each entry. This form may be photocopied. And when submitting materials, please make sure that you have included everything, which means all the material required, the completed entry form, the fee for the units you are entering for, and this form. Now, if submitted material gets lost in post, Trinity does not take responsibility, which is why we say, please keep a soft copy on a pen drive and a hard copy as well. In this form, all the details about the candidate, name, registration number, candidate number, center needs to be filled, the title of the exam, and also the list of materials you have included with this submission. And then at the end, the candidate's signature and the date. So this goes in with your entry and your submitted material. The second form is a verification form for relevant experience or contact time for the diploma exam. So here again, you put in all your details, the candidate details, and then you have to list the experience or contact time which is required in this diploma, which means that you would submit one form for your observation of teacher 1. You would submit a second form for the observation of teacher 2, and so on. A separate form for each of the observations, the 2 observations you've done, and also 2 separate forms for the case studies. Now, once you have listed that, you need to get this signed by the head of music or the teacher in the observation or somebody of authority. This is for the observation where you're submitting 2 forms. You could get the teacher to sign it also. If you're observing a group class, the head of the school that you're observing it from can sign it. Where the case study goes, you are observing children. You are teaching children, and we need permission from parents that this has been allowed by me. And the parent will sign the form in this case, or the guardian of the student. If it is a group class that you are writing about, then the head of department for music could sign it. I know it sounds like a lot of information, but it's quite clearly given in the forms and in the syllabus exactly what you need to do. So with this, today we come to the end of our Unit 1, which is completed. This is what we have coming up for you tomorrow, which will be the last of the 3 webinars, part 3, and a little overview before we go out and look at questions. Again, we will review part 2 in case you have any doubts. Part 3 is really Unit 2, which is all about practical applications. And this is the face-to-face component of the exam. So it consists of a presentation, an initiative test, and a Viva Voce. So we will be going through this in details tomorrow. And please come back because we have some live situations that we have created for you where we will be role-playing as examiner and the candidate. So it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow, and you will really enjoy this section of the exam. I know the doubts that are arising. When will I be able to do my face-to-face? But as I said, let us be positive. Let us prepare for the rest of the exams and get everything ready for this. And then we will definitely be able to take it. You have 3 years to complete this diploma in case you don't clear one part of it. So don't worry too much about that. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you all back tomorrow for Unit 2. I'm going to stop the share now, and we can all look at some of the questions or the chat box. There seem to be a fair amount of questions, Priya.
Yes, just looking at them. Should we look at the questions first?
Yes, please.
Do we have to let, I just saw a question there. The first one was, do we have to let students know that they are our respondent for our case study? Since you have to get the form that you will submit, the verification form, signed by a parent or guardian or head of department, I think the student will have to know that, yes, there is a case study. It is not going to affect either their learning or your teaching. This is only pertinent to you. So I don't see any problem arising from that. What do you think, Anjali? I think that's...
Yeah, I'd like to ask Chanel about this. Chanel, if you'd unmute.
Yes. I think it's actually professional practice to just keep the student involved involved in the sense just
in the know.
Yes, and the parent, of course. It does not, of course, affect their learning in any way. It probably only add to it, if anything, because you are conducting your classes as you would usually, planning it, reflecting on it. So the main thing is that you would be maybe additionally taking some more notes, but it would be professional practice, yes, to tell them at the beginning.
And that form does have to be signed in any case. So.
Yes, any case, yeah.
Correct. Do we get the slides for references? Yes, we will be sending all of you who have attended a separate PDF, as well as putting up a recording of the webinar on our site. So please wait for that. Are there specific parameters for selecting the case studies in 2 environments? So Chanel's 2 environments for solo and group. Yes, they could. You see, the thing here is that they have to be 2 different environments. It's not that you have a class of 6 students and you just divide them into 3 and 3. There have to be a different setting. The context must be, so you could have, say, maybe 2 adult learners and a class of 3 children. That could be yet another. Chanel, any suggestions here?
Yes, I think it's open to how we teach. So, how we've been teaching, there's no need to go into completely new context just because we have to give this diploma. As you said, it can be the 2 different contexts, can be adult learners or then students, because we're not drawing any comparisons really between the 2 contexts. So it's the case studies are
showcasing that we have a certain flexibility in our methodologies and structure of teaching.
Yeah, the students also might be at different levels because that is a different context. Suppose he's a beginner and then suppose he's giving his grade 8.
You could have a class which is only geared and working towards doing an examination from an international board, and you could have another class of very young children who are maybe doing it at a very basic hobby level. That would be a different kind of teaching environment. So those are some areas you could look at.
So the next question here from Kabuki is basic techniques for developing voice and vocal exercises. I think she means, as a resource, she's giving a suggestion of this, if I'm right. I don't know, Kabuki, if you can confirm that. Yes, she says yes. Okay, yes. Great.
If you're a vocal teacher, certainly. I mean, that is the natural way. That is your strength in your area of teaching. So you would be looking at voice.
Yes, and it's something that, the teachers are probably already doing, but it's just a matter about putting their thoughts together, getting it sort of on paper with their creative ideas.
Right. So the next question is about, can it be based on new students? No, but when you start your case study, you have to write at what level the student is, how long the student has been learning the instrument or being your student. You have to give something about the background of the students. So it does not have to be a new student. It could be your existing student.
In fact, I think there is a kind of a note over there, correct me if I'm wrong, Chanel, that the student should have been learning with you for a certain number of months. Am I right?
Is that right?
Case study?
I will have to check the case study.
Yeah, I think it is there. Anyway, is this diploma similar to level 4 course for music educators, the certificate for music educators, which is not available here in India? And if it says, I'm not very familiar with this CME, but if it says level 4 of the QCF, then yes, it would be at the same level. Yes, recording will be shared. We've said that before. This diploma, as we mentioned yesterday, Jolene, is applicable for any kind of teaching. It's really about pedagogy. It's about the principles of teaching. So it could be, we're not pinpointing an instrument here or a style like it could be for classical music, for rock music, for any kind of music teaching. Candidate will not have to perform Prem, the candidate does not perform in this diploma. As you've been seeing, there is no performance element. There is this written element, and tomorrow you will see what is the practical element, but there is no performance involved in this diploma, which is why it makes it so user-friendly, because a lot of us have finished grade 8s maybe a long time ago and left it there and then not gone on. You're not in practice really for performance and can't take the recital diploma.
You know, a lot of teachers many teachers do not perform, but they are wonderful teachers who have all the skills and knowledge of the principles of teaching and a good knowledge of their instruments. So this diploma is really tailor-made for them.
The next question, Chanel, would you like to take it? Is it okay to submit an observation of teachers of instrument other than your own instrument? Like I'm doing guitar, but is it okay to observe a piano teacher?
I feel something to think about in this case would be how would you apply it to your own teaching practice?
Exactly.
So if there are things that are relevant, maybe, but you would have higher chances of relating it to your own teaching practice if it's the same instrument.
And also the understanding would be a lot more if you're observing a teacher in your own instrument.
Yes.
Absolutely. Because there are certain technical aspects that you need to also factor in your observation.
Priya, if you could take the next one, does IB or IGCSE music teaching counted in the case study?
1 minute, can I just see where that question is?
Sydney Pereira, below this one.
Does IB or IGCSE music teaching, is it counted in the case study? Well, you know, the thing is that you, of course, it is not counted formally, but if you're teaching IB music and you have 2 students, say for piano, and you're preparing them, you can use that as an example of your teaching. The fact that your experience in your case study as a teacher, it is not that any extra weightage will be given if you're teaching it in an IB or an IGCSE music set. Just a question of teaching.
What about multiple instruments? Case study for students learning guitar and keyboard at the same time? Sunny, are you talking about the same time in the same class you are teaching children to do different instruments? I guess that's what I'm understanding. Yes, he says yes. So what do you think about this, Priya?
Well, the thing is that over here, then you will have to, if you're doing it as a group teaching class, obviously that would be a group teaching class.
Yes.
Then you have to explain very clearly how you're able to address individual needs, considering that they are different instruments, but in a collaborative learning aspect. Certain aspects are common to all music, like the aspect of theory or oral training. How would you be training them on the instrument? So, of course, you could do it, but then you would have to see that in those 1,000 words, whether you're really able to do justice to the requirements there of the case study.
Quite true. Also, does this diploma give us license to teach grade 6 to 8? You don't need a license to teach grade 6 to 8. There are a number of very good teachers who may not have done this diploma or any kind of diploma, but are excellent teachers right up to the highest level. So it doesn't say that if you have an ATCL in music teaching, you can teach grade 6 to 8. You could do it at any stage. But
I said that, yes, of course.
Yeah.
I think Anjali is going to say exactly what I was going to. Please go ahead.
Go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but please remember that with this diploma, your standing, your credibility, and above all, your performance as a teacher is enhanced significantly.
So it's not that if you've not done this diploma, you cannot take a grade 6 student or a grade 7 student. There's a question about a model ATCL recital exam. There's no model exams that we have. We would be running at some stage the performance diploma webinars or face-to-face workshops. So we don't have any recordings of that. Lots of doubts. You could write into us with your doubts. If you have any for the recital exam, we try and address them. Somebody saying, in case study for reference and video, what should we submit? There is no video to be submitted for case study, right, Chanel?
No, there's no video.
There's no video to be submitted. And as I said, it should be your case study, it should be your lesson plans, and any other things you've referred to, any articles, that's what I mean by references and bibliography. Anything you have read up. Same question again. I think that's it with the questions. Anything in the chat? Are we okay with the chat? Do we have any mentors?
Some questions I did address.
Somebody's asking, do we have any mentors? Well, you could approach teachers, senior teachers who might be willing to guide you through this. You could also talk to Chanel because she's experienced in doing this diploma. And there's lots of some nice suggestions here. I hope you all have all gone through interval game and for vocals, joining the dots from Diganto, and a dice with rhythm patterns. That's nice. So this is really interesting. And I think I do get a copy of the chat. Maybe I'll just list out and send you all when we send you the PDF, what all is being said over here. Right, so with that, I think we need to sign off. I thought this was going to be a short session, but it's turned out longer than yesterday. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending. I hope you enjoyed that. And we will see you tomorrow at 5 to 2. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the last segment of our Teaching Diplomas ATCL. This is part 3 and it pertains to Unit 2, which is the practical applications. So in today's presentation or webinar, we have already reviewed part 2 a little earlier. Under the practical applications, we have 3 components. The first is the presentation. The second is an initiative test of teaching. And the third is the Viva Voce. So we are going to go through in details all the requirements of these 3 sections and also do a little bit of role playing as we promised yesterday by acting out an examiner and candidate role. So when we look at this Unit 2, it consists of firstly a presentation, which is a teaching presentation for 10 minutes. And then goes on to an initiative test of teaching, which really tests your teaching skills. You're given an unseen piece which you need to then outline how to teach. This is followed by a Viva, and this is a discussion with the examiner about topics from the presentation as well as the initiative test, and also it relates to your Unit 1 submissions. This is all of 20 minutes. So the total time taken for this section of the examination is 40 minutes. So let's now look at the presentation. You are given 3 topics to choose out of. The syllabus has these topics listed. You could either choose establishing a successful teaching or learning teaching and learning environment, which could include the relationship, motivation of students, encouraging practice, keeping pupils safe, and using assessment constructively. Or you could choose teaching a particular technique pertaining to your instrument. The last topic given is teaching music musically, where you have to show the use of singing, movement, improvising, integral music, and technical, integrating musical and technical activities. So you choose one topic out of these and you design your presentation around this, which will be for 10 minutes. So let's have a look at what you can have in your presentation. It should include visual aids where appropriate. In the exam room, a music stand and a piano will be provided. If your instrument is not piano, please carry your own instrument. Where the examiner or you refer to concrete items such as repertoire, resources, these have to be given to the examiner. Broad generalizations should be avoided, and the candidate needs to draw from live experience, including that which you have put into Unit 1, like your observation or your case study. Candidates should use their own instrument to demonstrate and also use singing and movement activities for the examiner. You could also use audiovisual or multimedia resources, a presentation, a PPT, or any videos. But remember, the setup should not take more than 2 minutes. So now I'm going to call on Chanel to take us through the presentation section.
Thank you, Anjali. So for the presentation, I would like to focus on the topic of teaching music musically. As an introduction, I have said that teaching music musically is trying to explore different musical experiences to maintain student engagement. I've also given a list of things that I will focus on my presentation, which is movement, creativity, making connections, singing, and playing musical games. The first point is drawing from the teacher observation and my own practice. It also highlights the practical applications of the concepts. So I've observed that in my teacher observation, she uses a lot of movement in her classes. Her students are always moving to music, responding to music, and demonstrating musical concepts like dynamics, articulation, and time signature. This can be demonstrated to the examiner as well, as it would help him put it into context. I've also spoken about some of my movement activities that I have used, such as rainbow phrasing, or I've also mentioned musical chairs. I've also focused on creativity and expression as a form of teaching music musically, and this was evident in my case study, and I've also seen it in the teacher observation. In the teacher observation, she encouraged students to complete the musical sentence, where she would play a particular part and then they would complete it as an answer. I can demonstrate this to the examiner as well on my own instrument. I've also highlighted how I've used the improvisation resource, so I can show that to the examiner. As you remember, it was the Halloween improvisation resource for a student in my case study. When we are referencing work, we have to make them available also to the examiner. And it also draws on everything that we have from Unit 1 as well. Over here in this case, I talk about the Dozen a Day series, which makes connections between musical and technical aspects. And I've spoken particularly about the different modes, such as major and minor, and how they're depicted as rainy and sunny days in the book. I can also play this for the examiner to show how I would use it in my class. And the Key Trail resource, which if you remember was the Truth or Dare game that I incorporated in my case studies, is also highlighted here as a way of integrating theory and practice. As Anjali said, it's also good to include and demonstrate your instrument or voice in this presentation for stronger communication of the concept of the activity. Over here, we have singing activities, adding another dimension where they can internalize the music by singing the melody over the bass. In the class observation also, I noticed that the students were using a particular rhyme to learn the fingers of a particular scale. And I can demonstrate this to the examiner. 1, 2, 3, under, over, up the stairs. We need to go back down now. Next, I've also highlighted how musical games and act as a teaching element in our lessons and act as a good teaching aid. So I've also given a few visual aids to the examiner. As you can see over here, we have swatter rhythm, we have candy bingo, and we have grand staff pass. I say that the musical games help with the class, and it keeps it filled with energy. As you can see, I've also used a musical game in my original resource. Over here, when I explain swatter rhythm, you can see that there are pictures of bugs, and each bug has a rhythm on it. Each student is given a fly swatter or a bug swatter. The teacher claps a certain rhythm, and the student identifies it and swats that bug. There's a time limit given for this game, so the more number of bugs is when the student wins.
Thank you very much, Chanel. So that was the presentation in great detail. Now, we are moving on to Unit 2.2, which is the initiative test of teaching skills. Here, the examiner will give the candidate one piece of repertoire from the Trinity syllabus for their own instrument. This will be drawn from grades 1 to 5. The candidate will have 5 minutes to look through it, during which they may play parts if they wish, noting any areas of technical or musical interest. They will then be asked to first describe these to the examiner and then show a series of activities they would use to work on these elements in the context of a lesson. So here, as we promised yesterday, we are going to do some role playing. Meanwhile, there's a lot of text here and instructions which are there in the syllabus about how the candidate can go about this activity, the initiative test, and how they must demonstrate referencing strategies they would employ if a student was having difficulty achieving what they are asked to do, or how they would quickly develop the work and provide a further challenge if the student was achieving it too easily. So you do have to think on the spot. So now I'm going to put on my examiner's hat, and Chanel is going to be the student. Chanel, if you, yes, please, with your video. So Chanel, that was a very interesting presentation of teaching music musically. Let's now move on to the next part of this exam. Here is a piece from the grade 3 piano syllabus. It's called Sunrise on the Matterhorn. I would like you to study it for 5 minutes and then tell me about the musical features of this piece and technical challenges that you would see might be there for a student. So here Chanel has finished her 5-minute study. So I'm going to move on with the questions. So this is a very, very beautiful piece, Chanel. I'm sure you have played it in your mind or even tried it out on the piano just now. Can you give me some interesting ways to teach this piece, keeping in mind the context of the piece and relating it to wider musical concepts?
Yes, so as you said, it is a beautiful piece, and I would like to focus on the musical aspect first. Just by the title, we have Sunrise on the Matterhorn, which is a good imagery that we can discuss with a student. I would give the student a picture of this sunrise. We will discuss any thoughts that come to mind when we see such a picture and how this relates to how the composer has interpreted this imagery. I would also encourage the student to identify any similar passages in this piece. As we can see, there's an ABA form here. To facilitate easier reading of the different textures, such as the arpeggios and the chords and the melody accompaniment passages. And for the technical aspect, I would like to focus on legato pedaling, as it might be relatively new to the student at this point.
That's wonderful. Let's move on to a few more definitive questions that I have here. So how would you teach the broken chord pattern, which occurs several times in this piece, to be played smoothly while changing hands and crossing over?
Yes, so as we can see, this broken chord pattern is in the key of D major. So we would discuss the notes of the D major chord, and we would try it first in different keys, maybe the keys that they already know, so that first they get used to the crossover with the notes, and then try it at different points on the piano in the key of D major.
That's a great idea. Moving on, what do you think is the most difficult passage in this piece from the student's point of view?
I find that for the students, perhaps section B would be a little difficult because it requires greater coordination of the hands.
And moving to page 2 of the piece, could you tell me how you would show the difference between a writ and a molto writ in bar 25 and the last 2 bars of the piece?
So I would try to do this with movement. I would play sections of the piece writ, and I would play molto writ, and I would ask the student to react in his own way. Maybe he could walk while I am playing and react to the changes in the tempo, and then we would discuss what he's done and get closer to the definition and difference between the writ and molto writ.
That sounds like an interesting way of doing it, because combining movement is always very interesting and makes it very clear to the student how the pace needs to go when they are playing. And lastly, we have a fermata on page 2 at the end of the piece as well as in between. How would you teach the value of the fermata or pause? How long should the student hold it beyond the given value of the note?
I would encourage the students' listening skills here, as I would demonstrate and play this passage, and I would ask the student and take his input as to how long he feels I should hold the last chord for or the note, and we would do different variations and see which one fits best for this piece.
Thank you very much, Chanel. That's all I have for you in the initiative test. And now we will be moving on to the last segment of this exam, which is the Viva Voce. And I'd like to invite Priya here to take over the examiner's hand.
Been developed or maybe done differently or in different contexts. This discussion will then broaden to include materials submitted for Unit 1, as well as some principles of instrumental and vocal teaching in general. This discussion, which as you can see already, it's a very wide-ranging one, touching upon all kinds of topics and including materials from both the units. Then finally, there will be exploration of areas of development. And a candidate here will be asked to comment using concrete examples. They could talk about principles, but at every point, those principles need to be substantiated with concrete examples from a wide frame of reference in the response. So let's move on with this Viva and see what it's all about. So now I am going to put on the examiner's hat, as Anjali did a little while ago, and invite Chanel in again. And here we go. Chanel, you have shown us in your presentation and your initiative test that both of which were extremely interesting and touched upon a number of interesting and important aspects of teaching. So let's discuss this a little further. Let's begin with your presentation, where you demonstrated and talked about the connections that you make to music through various elements of music itself. This is a significant teaching strategy, of course. So what are your thoughts on it also being essential for independent learning? As a learning tool, have you considered assigning similar activities to your students to develop their approaching music in a musical way?
Yes, I do encourage creating compositions using the concepts the students know, we've already learned or are currently learning in the class. And I know some students are very good with technology, so we might transcribe them also onto a notation software so that it looks more professional for them. And for the younger students, I might even add some images into their compositions to make it look like it's from a method book.
Right. So they do approach music using all kinds of elements to think musically. Moving out of music, do you also bring in any extra musical aspects to your teaching?
I like to relate sound to color as well in my lessons. And we know how students have such a great imagination. And so I'd like them to interpret the music in their own way. So I would play a piece of music for them. I'd give them the sheet of music and they might color it in as to how they feel. They might color the loud parts red or a minor section blue, and that highlights their creativity.
That's interesting. Yes, that is a good use and good harnessing of a child's imagination to many, many elements. You are a piano teacher, Chanel, and as a teacher of this instrument, how do you expose your students to the very vast body of piano literature available?
Yeah, so when a student does come in for lessons, I do have a framework of progression in mind and the concepts that we will cover, and there's research done on my part to see which pieces we can include for these concepts. And it is also a collaborative learning environment. So I encourage student input as well, as they do like to learn a lot of pop music and even jazz later on. So I encourage students also to participate, attend concerts, listen to a variety of music so that they can be exposed to the variety of repertoire.
Right, let's talk a little bit about the digital resources, curating videos. As you know, I mean, young pianists today have access to a variety of such resources. So how would young pianists really harness something like YouTube to their benefit or other digital resources?
Yes. There are a lot of digital resources out there, especially YouTube, which has videos on tutorials, or it has other sort of digital aids to teaching. If the student is younger and would need parental consent, then that would be done as well. As you know, with YouTube, there are many videos out there. So it is important that the student is also guided through this process.
Right, thank you. I would now like to refer to your case studies, and I would like to know how you plan differentiated learning.
So in my case study, yes, the students were in a group, but they are assessed individually. So if a student was finding a particular activity easy, like in my case study, if the composition component was easy for a student, I would challenge him by adding more elements into it, maybe dynamics, maybe adding lyrics or something like that. And with a student who is probably not so quick, I would try and scaffold as I've learned in my teacher observation. You can play a duet along with your student, and also add in more elements by discussing these things.
Right. In your presentation, Chanel, you did stress the importance of improvisation as a class activity. And I noticed that you showed us your original resource, I think Halloween improvisation. But I also noticed that it had some imprecise alignment of the syllables to the rhythm given. So how did that work in your class?
I think when I was creating the resource, since I was explaining it, that probably did not come to mind. But when you are highlighting it, yes, since it's a rhythm resource, the words should be in alignment with the rhythm, and I will consider that when revising it.
Yes, I think one can't be too careful, though the resource itself was very innovative and a very nice idea. And I will now talk a little bit about your teacher observation. So did you, when you were observing other teachers, did you perceive a different or a definite orientation towards mastery or towards specific goals? These are two approaches which we find in the principles of teaching. And which approach would you subscribe to?
I think in my teacher observations, there were a combination of both mastery and specific goal learning, because the students did have examinations in mind, and also particular pieces in mind that they would like to complete. And mastery came along with that because they were setting a few goals to improve on their pieces. And I feel that a combination of both is good, as if you enjoy what you're doing, then you will automatically work towards achieving this final outcome.
Well, of course, there are a lot of methods out there, some of them very well established ones, like perhaps the best known would be the Suzuki method of teaching music. Are you aware, have you explored any other of the established methods?
Yes, I have explored Kodai and Orff in my teaching to develop musicianship skills.
Did you find them useful?
Yes, they were very useful, especially for the younger children, where we can include a lot more movement. So I use them more with the younger students, but I'm sure I can in some way adapt them for the older students as well.
So I'm coming now to a rather thorny area in the realm of music teaching, and that is to do with legislation, specifically copyright laws. So how aware are you of the various parameters governing copyright laws in the use of music? Let me give you an example. For say putting up a performance of an existing work, how would you go about obtaining permission to do so?
So as a teacher, I would mostly use this music in a non-commercial way. So I would have to contact the publisher of this work and obtain the necessary information to go ahead. I am aware that photocopying is prohibited and illegal, and we should take this seriously.
Right. So Chanel, I think this has been a very interesting session. And I would like to ask you, as any teacher would, what comes next? So have you identified the kind of training or the course of study that will enable an effective, continued professional development for you?
Yes, I am planning to pursue a master's in music education. I have considered a teaching musician program. It's on my list to explore, as I want to research and make an impact into the field of music education, also while reflecting on current teaching practices. And I feel that this will help me to understand music education holistically.
That's a busy time ahead for you, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
So I now will remove my examiner's hat, and I think you will agree that that was very interesting, and the candidate does have a lot of very challenging questions coming from all various different directions. So do be prepared, and I think the syllabus spells it all quite clearly. So in this component, as you can see, what should a candidate do? Respond positively to feedback, as she did when I pointed out the Halloween improvisation not being quite precise. Be able to therefore evaluate their own performance. Now there is identifying suitable training and setting realistic targets. That is for the future. That is important, and she had some very clear answers there. Understanding relevant legislation such as copyright laws, and also going on to other teaching values in the profession and legislative requirements like child safety and health, and having the knowledge, the subject knowledge, and the ability to communicate that knowledge regarding different teaching methods and approaches. So the candidate will be expected to demonstrate all these during this Viva Voce. Now this is rather text heavy, and you will find this in the syllabus, so I don't really want to go into this in detail. You can read this at your own time and pace, but I would ask you to please have a look at the highlighted words. What is the constant message being sent here? The word concepts, principles, evaluation, interpretation. Appropriateness of different approaches, structured and coherent arguments. All these point to the fact of the concept. Do remember that this teaching diploma is also called Principles of Vocal or Instrumental Teaching. So understanding the principles and concepts, and then being able to apply these effectively with proof and substantiation is what this diploma is all about.
Thank you very much, Priya, for taking us through that Viva. I think maybe you could apply for an examiner's job with Trinity College London, and we'd have our own examiner here rather than wait for them to come out. So this brings us to the end of our 3-day detailed webinars on the ATCL for music teaching. I hope you have enjoyed this. And if there's anything you want to put down, any experience of yours, please put it in the chat box. We have time to address this, or any questions which we will be addressing. But before we go there, I would just like to thank Chanel profusely. And really, I have so enjoyed, I think Priya and myself both have so enjoyed getting this together for y'all with Chanel, who has really been a great resource for us. And if you do need to contact any of us, here are our email IDs. You can contact Chanel directly also. And we would just like to say that as teachers, this is something you really need to look at. Even if you don't do the exam, do the work that goes behind the exam. Because by doing that, you will be developing. So it's very important that it's going to take a little time. I know there are reservations. People say, you know, we're not very fluent. But as Priya mentioned in one of the sessions, you just have to write in simple English, clear thoughts and ideas. So that is what is important. And you need to, as you saw in the Viva, you need to know your work that you have written, because you are going to be questioned on it during the Viva. So you can't really use anybody else to write for you. You have to do it yourself. And believe you me, you will become a better teacher and a good teacher, understanding all the principles of teaching very, very clearly. Of course, we hope to go on and do the LTCL music teaching diploma in the same way as we have done this after maybe a couple of months. So thank you very much. We are going to go out of this now. I will stop the screen share and we will move to the chat and the Q&A. So if Priya, anything in the Q&A?
Yes, there seem to be quite a few questions. The cost we'd already addressed. Please contact your local Trinity Center to give you the fee structure. The case study, we'd answered that question. I think Elizabeth had asked that. So I don't see any further. Can we just go down and see?
Having completed the ATCL, does it count for a job opportunity abroad?
Well, you know, this, I would say that a diploma of this kind would always make a difference, no matter where you applied for a job, because having a certification of this kind in your profession naturally would make a difference. Now, how exactly and what the requirements of the place you're applying to are would differ from place to place.
And Sangeeta, I don't quite understand your question. Is this going to be a teaching impromptu? There is no teaching impromptu. You're not teaching a class, but you definitely, the initiative test, you will not know what is coming there, which piece is coming. So that is the only place where you would be asked to demonstrate something unseen, unknown. The rest is all prepared. And of course, the Viva, the questions are going to come from your content that you have delivered in Unit 1 and Unit 2. So there is no teaching really except for the initiative test.
So we have a question from Caroline, which says, music will come from either syllabus classical or jazz woodwind. Which instrument I teach? So
so you would be teaching either the classical, you would put down as your main instrument, classical woodwind or jazz woodwind. And of course, the music that you get for the initiative test will come from your main instrument.
and decide to use a piano as a case. There are 2 case studies, remember. So are you saying that you would like to have one case study with piano and another one with another instrument?
I don't think that is possible, Priya, because you have listed your main instrument as one. Though Chanel knows, is proficient at teaching piano as well as voice and as well as violin, she put down piano for her main instrument. Right,
Because
Chanel?
Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
So
Yeah.
I just was going to say that in the case study, the 2 case studies have to be for the same instrument, but in different contexts, but same instrument.
Because also I think if you put down too many instruments, remember the syllabus, also the repertoire that comes from your initiative test also will be a lot more over there. And
yes, Lydia, of course, if you
Lydia, they will show you
rock and pop keyboard, obviously the piece will also be from the grade 1 to 5 rock and pop keyboard. Priya, you could take the next one.
teaching in a school scenario or just for instrumental. I would say that it's very useful for teaching in a school scenario, certainly, because don't forget, these are the principles of teaching. These principles are applicable in all kinds of contexts and environments. And definitely, I think they would be, I myself have adapted some of these principles in my own teaching when I was in a school, and I found it worked wonderfully in creating a well-structured class atmosphere. Yes.
I have another question here from Sydney Pereira saying that as a music teacher, we don't teach specific instruments.
All right. So how do you then, through what medium do you teach music would be my counter question.
Is it only theory of music that is being taught?
Is it?
Because I don't see, if you're teaching music, it has to be on an instrument. That's my understanding.
Or through voice?
Yeah. So Ivan says, suppose that would be a class singing in school. I don't know if that is correct. Sydney, if you could pitch in here and clarify what you are really asking. We can't unmute you. So please put it down in the questions. Meanwhile, we'll just move ahead. John Shelton asking about a course for string instruments at your university. John, I would just like to clarify, we are an examination board. We are not a training college or university. So we design exams and deliver examinations and certification. So you would have to look for a conservatoire or a university like Trinity, Laban, or any other one where you could access a course like that.
Diganta has a question. Initiative test comes from the songs from the Trinity Songbook or all the songs listed in the repertoire initial to 5. Yes, it's from grade 3. And
yes,
it was asked here because the candidate was a piano student, that is Chanel, a piano teacher, sorry. So I don't get the question.
No, I understand what Diganta is saying. For the singing syllabus, we have a huge repertoire, and
Yes,
some of it is contained in a book. So, yes. Diganta, I do imagine that it would come from the Trinity published songbook, because you can't really be familiar with all the pieces that are there in the repertoire. There's a huge number of pieces.
That's right. For singing, it's like that. That's right.
What kind of fee structure we have addressed? What kind of video evidence should we submit? I don't think we talked about any video evidence.
Your unit 1.3 is about your case study. The case study is written materials. There is no video. And so it's a written document.
There is no video evidence that we need to submit.
2,000 words of writing that you have to submit with an appendix and a list of references.
Can we choose any instrument? Yes, you can for the ATCL. 3 years, Prem, I guess you're asking that you need to complete both units within 3 years. Yes.
But it's only ATCL. Maybe he means LTCL as well?
For both of them, it's the same. The format of the exam is definitely a little different for the LTCL. Please do go through the syllabus link that we have given you. It's very clearly given there.
The 3 years is for both.
Yeah. Are there any downloadable materials that we can refer to? Well, there is a reading list that we put the link to yesterday, and there is nothing else that is really, you could go to the resources section on the Trinity website and have a look there if they have any guidance.
And yes, the format for ATCL and LTCL is not the same. The broad framework is the same, but the requirements are different.
Yeah, I got that one. Lingdo is asking that he has 2 boys, 7 and 8. They're more interested in football than playing the piano. I can quite imagine that. Had to incorporate football into my teachings to keep them interested and focused. So, well,
I've got a great book that I could suggest. It's called Spectacular. It's for very sporty children, and it's like a dozen a day, but it takes you through a variety of techniques, say, for example, on the piano, through all the games possible, from running to skating to hockey to football to basketball. And it's called Spectacular. And if you look on the net, you will find a multitude of such sources where you have analogies from other real life activities that are then transferred onto your musical activity.
And you can yourself develop some ideas as to how to do this. You know, if there are 2 boys together in your class, you could have a game where they're throwing the ball around and, you know, at a certain cue or in a certain timing, bouncing the ball in a certain time. There's endless possibilities. So you could think a little and get quite a number of good ideas. So Sydney has said that I use singing as a part of the teaching, and a lot of teaching revolves around theory. But for this diploma, Sydney, you would have to have an instrument, a main instrument. It could be singing, of course. It says for voice and instrumental teaching. So you would have to take some, highlight some instrument for this. You cannot do it with theory. If you don't clear 1 unit, we just answered that, you have 3 years to do it in. 8th grade piano. I would like to do ATCL in violin, having done. Here's a very relevant question here, Priya.
Yes. Well, no, I'm afraid if you've done a 6th grade in violin, then the instrument that you list in your entry form would be piano because you hold a grade 8 in that and not in violin.
You have to hold a grade 8 in the instrument.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not really understanding this. I was asking 3 years for each level. Maybe you could send us a mail and we could clarify.
As in ATCL and LTCL, yes. The ATCL is 3 years. The LTCL is 3 years. Separately.
Okay. Anything on the chat that we need to address? I think people have put in a lot of ideas here. Diganta's given some suggestions. Crisel Mendonça, yes, we will be sending you a recording of yesterday. And thank you to the person who pointed out that I had not recorded the first part of today's webinar. So for Priya, Chanel and myself, we are going to have to go through it again. I recorded it from the Viva, so we'll have to do it again till there and record it. But we will definitely be sending you all recordings as well as the PDFs. So thank you very much. It's been a great experience interacting with you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. And once again, I would really like to thank Chanel for all she has done to help us along to decode this webinar. We have one more question here. Is there a minimum qualification? We've just answered that. It's a grade 8 in your instrument.
Or equivalent from any other board.
Thank you, Ivan. I hope you too stay safe. I'm remembering that you are from Ludhiana. Okay, so we'll sign off now and participants could leave, and Priya and Chanel, if you could stay back. We still have participants. I'm going to end this and start another meeting. Okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.